What's up, hot sauce? I'm Alicia Shepherd, and this is the Commercial Blueprint, where we pull back the curtain on commercial real estate with industry experts and dear colleagues of mine. Today, I'm sitting down with a dear friend and co strategist, Vinnie Borriello. This isn't theory, and this isn't just another sales pitch. This is going to be us having a real conversation around what's happening in the industry today, his badass background, and what that impact has on his clients in today's market, and ultimately where we see the market going next. Vinny, I couldn't possibly introduce you to the full extent that you could. Welcome in and tell us who you are and where you're from, my friend.
Well, hello, Alicia. How are you?
I'm great, man. How about you, man?
I'm very good. I'm very good. So I'm Vinnie Borriello, and I have been in commercial real estate now. We just did the math recently, 27 years. I feel like that means I must have done my first deal when I was like 4 because I don't know how the math could actually add up.
Sometimes
But
the math feels really rude, right?
it
How
does.
dare it?
It does. I was like, wait a minute, could it really be? But the good news is that that has allowed me to see a lot of different cycles, a lot of different, the temperature has changed so much over the time period that it really helps me at this point. Whatever my clients are facing, I've kind of seen a version of it before, and that's a good thing. It kind of takes a little bit of sting out of almost any situation.
Out of all of it. I mean, you come from a really incredible pedigree that I think most people, if they met you on the street today in West Palm Beach, Florida, if you're not talking, they don't know that you're from New York. The minute you start talking, you out yourself. So tell us a little bit about where your roots in commercial real estate started.
Sure. So, yes, I started out in New York. The voice gives me away. I was an MBA. I got a job at a financial services firm to be a financial analyst. I'm going to date myself already, but one of the kids who grew up with the Gordon Gekko life, so that you really wanted to just get in with financial services,
Everything.
all that stuff. Yeah, all that slick back hair, the whole thing. And so I was a financial analyst,
Autumn,
and
pull up. We need to find a photo of Vinny with the slick back hair and the suspenders to pop.
The slick back hair is out there, the pinstripe suit, all that.
Cool.
So I was a financial analyst, and the asset class that I got assigned to early was real estate. And I really took to it. And I know everybody says this about real estate, but one of the things that drew me to it was that it is real, as the name would imply. It's something you can relate to, it's something you can touch. My colleagues who were doing derivatives, it's not really the same. So when you're looking at
Yeah.
real estate, that really brought me in, that you could really, it's the building and the tenants, and you could really feel what the numbers were comprised of, actual real things. So I really took a liking to it. And once I was doing financial analysis for real estate assets for about 4 years, I kind of jumped over the fence and I became an asset manager. I went into the business side rather than the analytical side. And that's when I really got an opportunity to see the real breadth of commercial real estate. Because at the time I was at a big financial services firm managing part of their portfolio. And financial services firm, they had retail bank branches, which were, little everything from things in Midtown Manhattan, the ground floor of huge office buildings, to little strip malls out in the middle of Queens. And so you get to deal with different landlords and different issues that are related to properties. And then we also had the big high-rise Manhattan buildings. We had data centers. We had,
I mean, and you're
warehouses.
talking data centers back when like data centers were a totally different identity than they are today. But I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah. And look, when I remember the transition, that the warehouses were boxes of folders where people were storing their data, to then being transformed to the digital age and all of that sort of thing. Um,
Wow.
so, so I got to see a lot of different things. What was real estate? Real estate was a million different things. And then I got to see it from different perspectives. I mean, I was an asset manager of a property that collapsed on 9/11. I did a deal with Lehman Brothers to try to save them. And then I was kind of around when Lehman Brothers disappeared. Some of the listeners may not even
Dun
know what
dun
Lehman Brothers is.
dun.
So, I did a lot of different things from a lot of different perspectives. And that really helped me out. Then from there, I jumped another fence and I became a consultant with really one of the big consulting professional services firms in the world. I was part of their real estate consulting group, and I did due diligence work for big acquisitions. Some of the big private equity firms, some of the big REITs would hire my team. We would analyze big deals to try to help them decide what the right valuation was. I got to see some really good deals. I was even
When
involved
you're
in a
saying big deals, what are you talking about? So like square footage or volume wise? How big we going, Vinny?
one of the deals that I love to talk about is a deal that I actually didn't go through, and that
It's the
was
one that got away.
one that got away, but they were glad it got away because the person who bought it went bankrupt with it, which was Stuyvesant Town. There are books written about it in Manhattan. 4.7 billion was the actual sales price. So I did get to see some pretty high ticket deals, which was great. And I was involved in a sale of a building that was 1,060 million. It's even hard to say the numbers. It was really interesting to be able to see that. Now I'm not there anymore. What happened? When you hear about burnout when you run at that pace,
Yeah.
it's kind of real. That's 70-hour weeks. That's
That's
10:30.
not uncommon. That's the expectation in those types of roles.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. If you're
10:30
not
at
doing
night,
it, you're not in the gig.
Christmas Eve, 10:30 conference call. That was the one that kind of got me, as there's got to be another way to live. At the time I had young kids, and I had said, you just can't. I did that part, the consulting part, for 10 years. And that's a long run for that kind of pace.
Yeah.
And
10
so,
years. That's not just a jaunt. That's the marathon at that level of work. That's incredible, Vinny.
and like I said, it went through the financial crisis during that period. I got to see all of the things that people talk about, and they laugh about, the dot-com bubble. I was with people putting in the spaces in the big office buildings that they wanted to make it look like a little ripped up warehouse because that's what they thought you needed during the dot-com era. They didn't realize that those companies who were working out of the warehouse couldn't wait to make enough money to have nice finished space. So it just,
Yeah.
I got to see a few different types of cycles. And then it became a point where you just can't run that way anymore. So I left that. I moved to Florida like all New Yorkers do. And I decided to start my own business. I thought for a little while I was going to be out of real estate, but just like the movie, just when I was out, they pulled me back in. I had that moment too. And I got back into real estate after a pretty short hiatus. I was barely out for a year. And it's different when you're used to those kinds of projects. I just say different. I don't say better. I don't say worse. I'm not doing those types of transactions on a daily basis today. I'm doing sometimes smaller transactions, but the principles are the same. And because of the experience that I had, and through different asset classes, different cycles, different economies.
You've looked at every angle of every size deal at this point.
Right. So, the principle of me trying to get somebody to buy a 2,200 square foot retail condo are the same principles as what you're doing when you're buying a $4.7 billion portfolio. A different scale, obviously, but you have to use the same mentality, and you're analyzing deals with the same principles. And that's one of the other things I like about it. Recently, I did a deal for a mobile home park. Now, that's not something that in any way, shape, or form people would think relates to a billion square foot Manhattan, $1 billion
No, even
square
if you
foot
say it, I'm
skyscraper.
thinking, I'm like, he just said he did $1 billion deal, and now we're talking mobile home park. That's like a right turn. So walk us through. You went from Manhattan, you make it down to Florida.
Yes.
The shift. I want to pause on that for a minute because I know this story, but what was the trigger point that made you pick up your life and move from Manhattan to Florida?
The trigger point was when I realized those kinds of deals, the kind of pace I was running at. Every father has that cats in the cradle song, like in
Yeah.
their head as like a demon chasing them, that you can't let that happen. And I just realized that as much as, and I love deals, believe me, I loved doing the deals, but I also didn't want that to consume my entire life, especially when I had young children and a wife. And I just thought, I just can't do this at this pace. That saying, you can have it all. You really
No,
can't.
you can't. No, you
You
can't.
can't. And I decided it was important for me to take a step out of that speed lane and take some time to kind of make sure that I was living the family life that I wanted to live. And so that's why I left that environment, went to Florida. Believe it or not, like I said before, I thought I was going to get out of real estate. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I started my own business. I started a fitness center. I'm not in terrible shape, but I'm certainly not a fitness guy. But I did it because, again, it was numbers. It was a business. It was the kind of business that I liked the feel of it. I didn't like the fact that there are certain businesses that you might not feel great about what you're selling. And so I was like, hey, this is something I can get excited about. So I got a gym. I got it up and running. I got employees. I'm running it as a business. And there's a point where I realize, hey, I'm really a real estate guy. I don't need to be doing this. This isn't really where I need to be. And so my wife had come down, obviously, to Florida with me, and she was into residential real estate. And when she was doing her residential deals and working at her brokerage, she was hearing a lot of people talking about wanting to do some commercial real estate deals, but they didn't really know. They didn't have the background. They didn't have the knowledge needed to do it. And so she said, hey, there's a need for you to get involved and do some commercial real estate here when you finish with this gym stuff. And I realized I had the bandwidth. I still actually own that gym. But again, it's a different type
But you're
of business.
leveraged in it now, right?
Eh,
You're not in the day-to-day with it.
No, I've actually figured out in that model how to be a business owner and how to leverage and how to delegate and how to study metrics and a dashboard and know when to get involved and when not to get involved. So that's how I do that business. So then I got back into the real estate business. And I'd like to get to that
Commercial
point.
broker in Florida? You're doing commercial?
I am doing commercial in Florida, yes.
What do you specialize in?
I specialize in retail properties in the West Palm Beach area, generally in the 5 to 15,000 square foot range. As I said before, because of my background and because I've seen so many different types of asset classes, and there are some principles that are really consistent no matter what the asset is, I do get involved in other properties. Like I said, when somebody said they had someone who was looking to sell a mobile home park that they had, and they said, do you have any experience? I started looking into it. I sat with the guy, I was going through it, and the principles are the same. If you think about it, it's almost the same type of analysis as you would have for a multi-story condominium office building in Manhattan. Now, you would say that's crazy. You're talking about a mobile home park in a Manhattan office building, but you're talking about what's the commitments, what's the revenue, what's the expenses, what are the risks, where is the growth opportunity, we're analyzing where the rents are going. And you're doing the same things, you're just doing it for a different profile of asset.
Yeah. Totally get that. I mean, you're telling me you specialize in 5 to 15,000 square feet. My brain immediately goes, damn, those owners are lucky to have like that level of expertise on that level of real estate, right? And that's not to say that like a mom and pop owner or small businesses or the folks that are in that size of real estate don't deserve the absolute highest level of expertise. But it's rare that we see someone like climb down from the Manhattan Towers expertise level to work in this type of real estate. So you're looking in your market, you're working with the owners in their day to day. What are you seeing right now that is impacting your clients the most?
Well, there are really two factors that are really causing a little bit of friction in our market. And I know this happens in a lot of markets, Alicia, right now, but especially where we are, there is a bit of a disconnect between what the buyer profile would be on an asset based on today's debt cost and what the interest rates are today. Things have changed with the interest rates not being dirt cheap, which again, I've been in this game a long time.
100%.
I've never
These
seen
interest
this like
rates
that.
don't like totally blow up my mind either, though.
They don't, but some
They're
people had
normal.
no, but people condition themselves to those twos, threes, fours, which didn't make sense when they were happening, of course. And so there are buyers who, when they rerun the numbers, they're recalibrating what their buy box will be from a pricing perspective. But the owners have a thought in their head that their asset was worth a certain amount based on the old pricing structure of debt, and that there are a lot of cash buyers. Now, in our market, the South Florida market does attract cash buyers, especially from overseas. And so what happens is every once in a while, one of those cash buyers who really is agnostic to interest rates because it's not applicable, and they'll give the owner their price. And so that kind of emboldens the rest of the owner community to say, see, we don't really have to change our mindset because of the changes in the cost of debt, because this unicorn cash buyer is going to come out of the sky. And it happens once in a while. Now, that's a good thing for the market. It's good for velocity, but
good for that one owner.
Right. But it doesn't really get that gap between buyer and seller closed in the way that it really needs to. But we're starting to see that. I think most people, even on the buyer side, are starting to see, as you said a moment ago, that these interest rates are fine. That, getting an interest rate that starts with a 6 traditionally is a good thing and not a bad thing. We're starting to see
you have to have real metrics in how you take down a deal. You can't go into it on a pro forma. You have to go into it with real understanding of how's this deal going to actually make money.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Real foundations.
And the other thing that we're seeing in that space is there's a big demand for the small business tenant in these spaces, because the South Florida migration, the post-pandemic, that everybody looks and sees the numbers and the charts about all the, Ron DeSantis, the governor, likes to talk about 1,300 people a day move to Florida rather. And it's true, but most of them don't move down here with a corporate job. Most of them are coming down here to start a small business. They want to have they either have a landscaping company, or they're starting their own printing company, or they're starting their own, maybe they were an accountant, they're coming down to open their own accounting shop. So it's really a small business economy. And a lot of the landlords, similar to the disconnect that I mentioned earlier about pricing because of interest rates, the landlords are looking for the expansion of Starbucks, and they're looking for the expansion of the national chains, and they're looking for corporate guarantees. And
the small business owners are just a little SOL in that landlord's mind.
Yes. Again, the disconnect, even though, of course, there's expansion from big corporate companies in Florida. It's a growing economy, but there's an even bigger push from the small business community. And that's something that the owners need to get comfortable with and realize that that's really where their next tenant is likely to come from.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think that as an agent, I hear you sharing this and I go, okay, expertise to insight. That's insight to advice, right? Let's pivot this for a minute, because we've been talking a lot from like what's happening in the market. If I'm an agent or an investor thinking I want to represent myself in the market, I want to pick your brain for a minute. What's one strategic takeaway you would tell anybody that wants to be brokering in the market right now that they got to strategically be thinking about and deploying for themselves?
Well, what they really need to be doing is not looking backwards, okay, looking forward at the market. There really is a tendency that I've seen from investors that are coming to the market, people who are looking around, they're almost looking backwards. I'll give you a good example. I know we mentioned before about the retail 5,000 to 15,000 square feet, but there was a big multifamily boom post-pandemic South Florida. Okay. So you have a lot of investors who heard that, they came in, they come down. Well, guess what? There've been so much development in the multifamily space that to this point, that's not the same opportunity. Rents are not growing as they were because there's an oversupply at this point.
It all caught up.
Right. And so it's important to look not at the market that happened, or even the market that's really here right now. It's almost looking ahead to where is the market tomorrow. And that seems to be something that really is hard for some investors to get their mind around. They like to just be able to look at data, but unfortunately, most data is backward. It's the rear view mirror.
It's a historic trend, right? Especially if we're looking
absolutely.
at comparable data. That's looking back 60, 90 days in some cases.
Right. And the market does change for certain asset classes in certain areas quicker than that. And so it's really important to be looking beyond those indicators from 90 days ago. Sometimes they're looking at things that are 180 days ago. I mean, in certain areas, that's a completely different one.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got that as like a strategy to go in, right? Now give me a habit. What's a tactical habit that you would say, dear agent or investor, this has to be your daily habit to not only survive this market, but to actually do really well?
It might sound really simple and almost trite, but you really need to speak to people in the market. You need to talk to the new developer, the landlords, the tenants, the buyers, the sellers. You need to really understand what the people who are transacting today are doing, thinking, seeing, because you need to put together the picture of from all of these data points about where it's coming from. So it's really, I mean, everybody says you need to be out there. What does out there mean? Out there means having regular conversations with all of the players. For instance, this morning, I had an appraisal on one of my properties that I have under contract. And I made it a point to sit and speak to the appraiser for a few minutes to ask him about what other properties has he done appraisals for in this area? What is he seeing? What about velocity? Is he getting a lot of calls? Is he getting more calls than he used to get? And I wanted to pick his brain because there are people who are seeing the market from a different perspective than you are. And the only way for you to have a holistic view and for you to really be able to advise is to be able to cull those data points from as many different sources as you can.
Love that. Love that. And so get in the market, have the conversations. If we look the other direction, here's the habit I want you to have. What's the mistake you see agents keep making that they just need to knock that shit off?
Look, I think one of the problems for today's agents is that they think, look, everybody loves online leads. Everybody loves to get leads from their listings, things like that. So there's a tendency to be passive. There's a tendency to wait for, I guess it's not always the phone to ring, but for the ding of the email to come through.
Yeah.
And while that's great, and while that does help, and people are doing business that way, it's not going to give you enough insight. You need to go further than that. And like I said, you need to be in the market, make the calls, have the meetings, have conversations.
Love that. Don't delay that because you're not worried you might not know what to say, by the way. That's the one piece I'm going to add on that. So many times, even as an investor, of people I talk to that are working on making their calls or prospecting as an investor, and they put off making the call because they don't know what they would say.
You know, that's a funny
That's such
one.
a silly reason not to call.
That's a funny one, Alicia, because as I said before, throughout the course of my career and the different twists and turns, many times I encountered something I had never encountered before. And it's okay to say, let me find out about that and get back to you. Right?
Mm.
That's not a sin. That is
No.
not a loss. That's not something to be embarrassed about. I would rather, if I called somebody and if they said, let me do some research so I can give you a well thought out, reasoned answer.
And not bullshit you? You mean let me give you an answer so I don't bullshit you? Yeah, that sounds great, Vinny. Let's do that.
So that's why I think people are hesitant to do it, but it's okay. Have the call, find out what they're looking for, and tell them I'll find out for you. Let me figure out what solves that problem for you, and I'll get back to you. That's not just an acceptable answer. I think that's probably the best answer.
All day long. That's what a professional shows up to say. I love it. All right, before I get you out of here, Vinny, I got to do what I call kind of like that, like colleague beer test, right? We're sitting at the bar. It's after work. We're just hanging out. It's back and forth, unscripted. If we weren't on mic right now, what's the one thing you'd tell me about your business or the market right now that just friend to friend you think is vital for someone to hear?
Friend to friend, I think the main thing to do is to don't chase the deal. Chase the relationship, right? A lot of people, you have the conversation. I had a call today with somebody who had wanted to buy a restaurant. We met, he was hot. He was calling me late at night, and then he went cold. He was interested. I might be looking in another area or that. You call him anyway. You talk to him. What's going on? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you looking for? How can I help you? You just do that. And then the deals will come. It's easy to say, damn, I thought that was going to be a deal. Now he's looking someplace else. Let me just cross him off the list. Maybe you don't call him at the same frequency, but you just keep having the conversations. You just keep doing it. Don't chase it. The deals will come if you do the steps. You don't have to chase the deals.
Don't chase. That's right. But do the work.
Right.
Do the work and the deals will show up right in front of you.
One of the podcasts I can't think of now, fall in love with the process, not with the results, and the results will come. I can't remember who said it. Somebody smarter than me. But it's true. It's about the process. And if you just stick to it, the results will come if you have the consistency and the dedication.
That's right. And Vinnie, you have a new podcast that's coming out. Tell us about that before I let you go.
Yes. So I am co-hosting the CRE Edge podcast, which is the KW Commercial official podcast. It's just in the early stages. We look to have our first episodes out probably right around October 1st. We're very excited about it because we think that the commercial real estate space is a little bit lacking for the right types of content. And what do I mean by right types of content? I mean, something that is educational. We talk through deals. We talk through how did this person build their business, do this type of deal with it, what are the steps they took, but we don't want it to be, just a checklist and a boring, notepad worth of do this, do that. These deals are interesting. They're fun.
Yeah.
There's stories to tell. You said about you sitting around having the beer with your colleague. You laugh about some of these deals, right? And
good. Yeah.
And that's missing, I feel, from most of the commercial real estate content that's out today. And so what we want to do is we really want to toe that line between being very informative, very, very educational, but also being entertaining and fun and something that you feel like you're hanging out with some colleagues, having a few laughs, and telling those deal stories. That's something I would want to listen to. So that's something that I would want to put out to the community to share and enjoy.
Well, that's exciting. We can't wait to see it when it drops, Vinnie. I'm excited y'all are putting that out.
Thank you. I'm really glad you had me on. It's so much fun spending some time with you, Alicia.
Likewise. Thanks, Vinnie. All right, guys, that's it for today's commercial blueprint. Short, sharp, and built for people who actually want to go win in this market, be you an investor, an agent, or just someone hanging out on the sidelines of commercial real estate. If you're listening and you're ready to stop playing small and to start thinking like a top producer in the commercial real estate space, this show's for you. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next conversation. And if today hit you hard, share it with one other agent or investor who needs to hear these messages. I'm Alicia Shepherd, and that's Vinnie Borriello. Thanks for pulling up a chair with us. Now go put it to work. See you on the next one.